I'll call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, June 21st at 2 o'clock. I would like to begin by acknowledging on this Indigenous Peoples Day that we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Símpcwemc people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Are there any late items we would like to add to the agenda today? Okay, there are two changes. One, the item on 7.2 SCADA will be moved to in camera. There's an additional report that you received on table for that. And the other item will be moving George's presentation to 9.2 after Mr. Vieira's discussion, and that's on the community forest resolution to UBCM. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as with those changes? Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Bamford. All those in favor, and that passes. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the June 7th meeting. Any errors or omissions? If seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder on that one, please? Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor, thank you. Moving on to item 7.1, bus stop relocation, verbal update from the CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. We followed up with Colliers and Bylaw, and they have agreed to allow the bus to rest for at least up to 10 minutes at the location for a switchover.
So that basically means we let things stand as they are and we don't really have to make a decision on that. Everybody's good with that? We'll go with that. So, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. There's nothing, that's correct?
No.
I've got that wrong.
The previous meeting, council wanted confirmation that Bylaw was okay with allowing the relocation to occur at the Bylaw stop. We have gone back and forth and they have finally agreed to that.
Good. Okay. Good. We don't have to make a decision then. Okay. Would you like to make a decision that we go with what Colliers and Bylaw is willing to do? You're to make that as a motion, Councillor Frizzle. Seconder, which is basically a 10-minute stop there. I'm getting that correct. Somebody second that. Thank you, Councillor Bamford. All those in favor? Cool. Transit is fixed. If it was just that easy in Vancouver. Moving on to item 7.3, council committee representation. You have a report in the package on this, pages 20 to 22, and discussions before the meeting with councillors. If there's something that, oh, sorry, it's not 20 to 22, it's 23 to 28. If there's something that most people just seem to want to go ahead with what they're doing currently on the schedule. If there's something you do not wish to take on or wish to drop off for the last 3 months, I'm okay with taking it on for the rest of the term if I'm available. But Councillor Sim.
So Councillor Bamford, you weren't here last time, but I wondered if where things were standing with your cemetery committee, because your team loves you. They think you run a tight meeting and they're excited to continue working with you. I know that maybe I'm phrasing that a little biasly, but you're awesome. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you. I'll have a full report when we get to that on the agenda. Briefly, we've looked at structuring things to be able to bring something to council in September. So before the election, the bylaw can come to council and have it done. We're scheduling a field trip and a half-a-day workshop to go over all the stuff that needs to come to council that we've talked about so far. We're almost through the bylaw. The CEO has been a great help. We've scheduled some stuff around his schedule. So we're going to do a field trip. We're going to have the stuff ready to bring to council that council needs to consider. So it's going ahead really well. We're actually doing 2 meetings a month now to sort of bump it up. So
task force committee or Trails Task Force, look out.
Yeah. I think Councillor Taylor, were you hoping that Councillor Bamford would stay on that role until the end of term? Was that?
I'm supportive of that. Absolutely.
So Councillor Bamford, are you okay with continuing with that committee to the end of the election?
No, it would be really hard for someone else to step in and
Yeah.
Yeah.
pick
okay.
up on all these discussions that we've had. So
So we'll just make that change. Any other changes that anybody would like to make? Just,
I just-
I will stay on the task.
okay,
I would make a motion then that we, that we maintain the current functions that we have now, unless there's a schedule and they can discuss that with the mayor. Is that
Okay.
reasonable?
yeah. You make that, you're making that a motion.
Yeah.
So a seconder on that. So we're keeping the January 1st to June 30th schedule through to October 31st, unless there's a conflict, and then we can discuss that individually with me and the CAO. Okay. So moved and seconded by Councillor Frizzle and Councillor Bamford. All those in favor? Okay, that's good. Annual municipal port report, item 7.4. So we have it.
Am I supposed to do something? No?
Nope.
Oh, good. I didn't know you were looking.
We're just getting Mike set up.
No, okay, well, we've, so this meeting is to be the meeting where we receive public feedback, if there is any. We've also been collecting public, or we put out there that the admin at docbc.ca email has been prepared to collect any comments from the public with regard to the annual report. We have not received any as of now, but the annual report has now been nicely printed and there's copies available, and we'll be sending them out as well.
Excellent. Yeah, great work on this, by the way, and thank you to Councillor Sim and others for the edits that they put in, correcting all the fine details and stuff like that, which is great. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes on these things. Yeah, definitely a good job on that. So there's, for the public, anybody that wants a copy, there's a copy by the door, and anybody through the media want a copy, you can come get one from here, or it'll be available online, I'm sure. Moving quite right along, 9.1, Mr. Vieira, come on down to the front desk here. I get to see Jamie at TNRD meetings, but this is the first time he's been to Clearwater in a little bit. Well, welcome to the being in person part of the job. Okay. Thank you. Fire away.
There we go. So again, I think I have a presentation that's going to flash up here. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. Always a pleasure to be here in Clearwater. So I'm here to just give an update on the committee review that the TNRD just went through actually just last Friday in the committee of the whole meeting, and it does impact one of the committees, the Joint Services Committee. So that's why I'm here today, to kind of cover off that aspect of things and fill you in, and be here to answer any questions that you might have. So just briefly, the process that we went through, this was a TNRD-wide committee review that we looked at all the existing standing committees appointed by the board. And so what we did is we looked at, the review looked at the legislative framework of each of the committees, including looking at the history and what previous iterations of these committees existed, looking at the composition of each committee, and we looked at the effectiveness of the committees. And by effectiveness, I mean, not that they were actually getting work done, but were they actually doing the work that they were originally intended to do, or had it evolved from that original intention? And also looking at what recommendations were going forward to the board from the committees, because the purpose of the committee is to make recommendations up to the board. And then after we did that, we recommended changes or improvements to the structure. So the idea of this review was not that there was any work or being done or topics being discussed that were irrelevant. We knew that wasn't the case, but it was more of looking at not less work to be done, but making recommendations of how to ensure the correct people were doing the work that needed to be done. So this is the slide I shared, is the idea of the work smarter, not harder mentality that we were going for. So jumping into the committee that we run jointly with the District of Clearwater is the Joint Services Committee. So the brief background, and some of you here may know the history even better than I do, originally established in 2009, shortly after the District of Clearwater incorporated. There was some minor tweaks through a committee review we did in 2018 to the mandate. Now, the majority of the work, as you may know who sit on that committee, it revolves around the Sportsplex and the transit service, which is owned by the District of Clearwater run by the District of Clearwater, but TNRD contributes 40% of the annual funding for those two services. The membership is the Mayor of District of Clearwater, the Electoral Area Director for Area A, one councillor, one member of the public, and the CAO and the services coordinator from the TNRD. So the committee discusses items of common interest and makes recommendations up to the Clearwater Council, but then as well as they make recommendations that go through the Wells Grey Country Services Committee that then go on to the TNRD board. So what we found after kind of digging into this is that, you'll note here, I say it's similar issues to some of the other service committees that we reviewed, is that the bylaw that establishes the committee gives the committee authority or implies authority, which hasn't actually been appropriately delegated by the TNRD board to those committees. For example, there's mention in the bylaw about operational decisions and budgetary decisions, which really need to be properly delegated by the board to do that. And having committees making those decisions is odd. Typically, the operations are directed by staff, and then strategic direction and budgets are set by boards or councils. Now, the committee bylaw does actually mention strategic direction as a role of the committee specific to those services, transit and the Sportsplex. However, it's not a common, looking back at the minutes of those meetings, it's not common that staff needs strategic direction from that committee. And if so, what we propose as a better model is getting that strategic direction directly from TNRD board and District of Clearwater Council. So yeah, and another note, within the TNRD, we actually have many other joint services that we work on with other municipalities. This is the only area where we have a joint services committee. So moving forward on to the final slide I have here is this was the proposed model moving forward that we presented to the TNRD board, that we dissolve the joint services committee and replace it with this process. And like I mentioned, we have this process in place with other municipalities. So essentially we propose entering into service agreements with the municipality for those services. So there'd be a separate service agreement for the transit, separate service agreement for the Sportsplex. Now, in that service agreement, we would, and this is going to take a bunch of work from staff perspective, but we lay out exactly sort of how we want it to operate. So for example, how the funding model works from a taxation, the accountabilities, reporting requirements, how capital decisions are made. I don't have the answers to all those now, but those are what would be laid out in that service agreement. Typically where that would start would be discussions from staff and then escalated to council and the TNRD board to make the decisions going forward. Now, separate from those sort of kind of operational services, we recognize that this committee operates as a mechanism for the electoral area director to have discussion with this council, raise issues, share information. So we wanted to make sure that there's a mechanism for that to still take place if this committee didn't exist. So separate from these service agreements, we recommend, and I've spoken to your CAO about this, and this was actually his suggestion, is that we could have, or that you were willing to have the electoral area director as a standing agenda item on your council meeting, and then that would be the proper mechanism to bring issues forward, to bring concerns, or to share information with the council from in this meeting. And then that would include all of the council instead of just select members of the council, and having those discussions on a regular basis here at that meeting. So that was presented to the TNRD board on Friday, and the TNRD board, sorry, it was actually a committee of the whole meeting. So technically the committee of the whole recommended to the board to bring this forward and approve this recommendation to dissolve the committee and move forward with that proposed model.
Hey, any questions for Jamie on this? Councillor Taylor.
So thank you for that, Jamie. My understanding is that within that joint services, we would discuss things in both directions. So services provided by TNRD that are funded through taxation collected by District of Clearwater and vice versa. So does the model that we're proposing, is it mirrored in both directions for those services? Like, is there an equivalent then for, say, library services?
Yeah, that's a good question. So library services is a service, a TNRD wide service, and yes, the District Clearwater pays into that. So that service specifically, those decisions go through the TNRD board. So there wouldn't be a separate service agreement there because it's already a TNRD wide service, and District of Clearwater has a voice of the TNRD board for those kind of policy decisions. So not to say that from a staff perspective, we can't update if there's specific questions about that we could address, but there wouldn't be a service agreement in place for those services. Only ones where we basically have money changing hands outside of what's set by the TNRD taxation, if that makes sense. So in terms of the library service, it's already built into the District Clearwater participates in that service through taxation, but not through a separate standing agreement.
Sense. Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Taylor? Councillor Sim, go ahead.
I may not be translating your question right, but are you saying that you would like to know if the TNRD director can add agenda items? Is that what you're saying? So that there is that mirror so that it can be a joint development of the agenda? Is that what you're asking? Or no?
So I guess I'm asking if there's, because it's a two-way model of there are services provided by the district that TNRD residents partially fund through their taxation, and there are services provided by TNRD that I believe we partially fund
We do
through our taxation.
on Eco Depot Library, but there are technically service agreements for things like invasive plants, which the invasive plant program where
Yeah.
we take it. So there already are some two-way streets. It's just some of the longer running services that predate the District of Clearwater, like garbage, Eco Depot, as they call it now. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I want to make sure that we acknowledge that it's not just the things that we discuss at that forum wouldn't necessarily only be, well, I've not been in the forum, but are they typically only the things that the district provides and TNRD partially funds, or do we also discuss those other aspects that are relevant to the community but sit within TNRD?
Well, I'll just defer to another TNRD staffer here, Sherry, if you want to yell from the crowd.
If I may, Joint Services Committee bylaw was put in specifically those services which were transferred or dealt with from the TNRD to the district that were incorporated. So it dealt specifically with three things. It didn't address those regional district-wide. It only dealt with television broadcasting, which remained expanded our world. So we don't talk about that anymore. So the two remaining ones do reside with the district. That's why it seems like sort of one-side conversation is because which the District of Clearwater has the operational responsibility.
Great clarification. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Bamford and then Councillor Sim.
My question to Jamie, and thank you for your presentation. Given that it currently operates under a bylaw and we're going to basically a service agreement, there would be more flexibility in my mind about adding to the agreement or having things going forward that you may want to adjust the agreement, such as if we need to do a lot of repairs to the tennis court, it services both people inside and outside of municipality, very similar to the sportsplex. That's why. So if those issues came up, my understanding, the agreement could be amended quickly versus having the whole bylaw route if it was acceptable to the TNRD for that one-time maintenance issue where we had to upgrade things, for those things that service the broader scope, just like the ball field services inside, outside. There's things that the municipality is carrying the burden for. It's very similar to the Sportsplex, and the Sportsplex is great for everybody. So is that correct? And the only other quick question is, in the years I've been on council, I don't think I've ever heard when the TNRD was looking at changing the tax rate for a municipality for library services or anything else. Do we get informed of that when that occurs, or it just happens?
So two questions. I'll deal with the second one first, because it's an easy answer, because the answer is I don't know for sure. But that's more of a finance question. But it's elected. It depends on the. I know a little bit. It depends on the service. So, for example, the library service, all electoral areas and all all municipalities pay into the service, and it's based on converted assessment. So there's no. It's not a percentage exactly, it's based on the assessment. So every year based on BC assessment numbers, it may be tweaked how much, if you actually do the math, the percentage is, but it's not a decision of the board. It's an automatic
something
BC assessment thing. Yeah. And your first question around, yes, the service agreement. Yeah, one of the benefits is you can amend it and by, a board and council resolution, we can amend and change the terms of an agreement if necessary.
A lot more flexibility that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sim?
Just in terms of the timeline for this recommendation is it says to dissolve it now. What you said in your presentation is going to require a lot of work by district staff. So I don't know what a lot looks like, and I don't know if a lot is enough of a reason to look at phasing this in for late fall.
Answer that. The TNRD's already dissolved it at their end.
And we're done.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further, thank you for your time, Jamie. Any comments from our staff on this?
I will reach out to Jamie and CAO Hildebrand with respect to maintaining the current arrangement until a formalized agreement is in place between the two entities to address any potential gap issues that may exist.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the gist of this, Director Schaefer actually brought this motion forward at TNRD, moved it, so she is actually in favor of this. So I don't think there's any issues there. And realistically, the vast majority of the business being discussed at joint services was actually staff business, staff to staff sort of decisions. Anything that requires, as Jamie said, a decision that is more in the realm of direction or is more representation will still be brought to us for a discussion. And Director Schaefer, if she wishes to address Clearwater Council on issues, can quite obviously do that as a delegation at any particular point. So, okay, thank you for coming up, Jamie. And I'm sure you've been looking at the rivers on the way up here going, ooh, 2 days of rain and 33 degrees or 31 degrees on the weekend. I'm sure it's a little, yeah, EOC time. Anyways, yeah, thank you. So we're going to move on to item 18.7 for Mr. Briscoe, which is page 246 of your agenda, just so that we can be done that, and George can go on his way if he so wishes. So this is about a UBCM resolution regarding pricing policy for community forests. And maybe, George, I'll get you just sort of explain this a little bit for everybody, including the crowd. Push the button on your mic there if you could. You don't have to get as close as Jamie, but go ahead.
Okay, so the whole structure in the community forest world is based around the tabular rate structure. So that is it's basically a rebate method that we as community forest tenures get from the government to operate small tenures. And that's done through the stumpage system. They're through the forest revitalization assessment of community forests and forest tenures. It's being challenged. Our rate structure is being looked at, and discussion is being put forth of possibly removing it from community forests. it supports everything we do. It supports the fact that we were able to, our community forest was able to give $1.3 million to Evergreen Acres, right? So it hinges on this very fact, the tabular rate structure. So we are sort of, all of us that have community forests have gone to our districts and whatnot and asked the districts to help us support this rate structure at UBCM through a resolution. So that's what's before you. And I think you guys have done a great job doing the research. Michael's done a really good job of putting a facts together, I think, there too. Number of community forests have submitted their own letters directly to Forest Minister. Probably not the right way to go. So I think this is smart to just be unified at UBCM over this one issue for community forests. And yeah.
So just for my understanding, we're basically asking for the status quo to continue, what exists right now, and not to change this. And reading the report, some of the initiative by the BC government to change this is related to First Nations community forests coming on board, and an expansion of basically the woodlot / community forest, Indigenous for community forest network that was putting pressure on them to come up with a different model to avoid some political issues with the United States a little bit.
Yeah, so I can explain that. So there is inequity between the two tenures, essentially, right? A community forest tenure and a woodlands First Nations tenure. So that is, they don't have the same deal. I will use the word they. That tenure doesn't have the same deal as community forests. So there's a drive to make the two like or similar. Well, the talk right now is to perhaps pull us down to make the two equal. Not, we're advocating that the support goes to woodlands First Nations tenures, the First Nations woodland tenure, community forest style of small tenure management.
So move community forests.
Leave us alone and help
First Nations should be under the same essential stumpage model as our tabular rate table as ours. So that First Nations community forests can put the same benefits that we've seen from our community forests back into their systems.
Extremely similar tenure. It's just offered in a different way to Indigenous communities, if you will. Okay. They're not given community forests.
So further to this, we should be advocating for First Nations to get what we get.
We don't directly have one here, but SRG, Simp Resource Group, they do manage one, right?
Yeah.
So there is in the valley alive for those tenures as well as community forest tenures.
Thank you. I see Councillor Bamford, you have a question or thought?
Just a thought, and I brought this up with George ahead of time. I mean, I think the resolution's good. In my past life and my past experiences, there's a couple of things when community forests were established in woodlots, and George knows this. The stumpage rate was set because of the amortization of small volumes. So community forests and woodlots had small volumes, not 250,000 cubic meters like a forest license or whatever else. So one of the things that could be considered as an option too, and people can speak to this at UBCM, even have a cap. If you say, if it's under this, be it a First Nations tenure or a community forest or woodlot under 60,000 cubic meters, it goes tabular rates. If it's over, then look at some of the model kind of thing, because you're getting into where the amortization of cost changes. The other type thing is that important, I think, to point out whether it's in the resolution or not. For my mind, just community forests were established to protect view sheds and watersheds of communities. That was one of the main principles there. And those things are critical in relationship to the extensive management that's done in community forests. So I think those two things are also very important to bring to government, because it ties back to the original intent of government in the beginning. So that's all.
Thank you.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah.
Further questions for George? Thank you, Councillor Sim. Go ahead.
So there's a couple of things. One is a motion like this is really important. You've said that other community forests are also speaking to their local government. It seems to me that there's room to not only put this forward because of the deadline, but how do we do a coordinated voice with those other communities? Because to get something like this, to get it lifted off the UBCM floor, it takes a lot of work.
Right.
So I'm wondering what that strategy is looking like. So it's not Clearwater and then the rest of the room is silent on it.
Yeah, so we are all part of a network of a community forest association. So there's 52 of us in British Columbia. Half are owned by Indigenous communities. We are actually the only ones that are owned by the citizens of Clearwater, the citizens of the community, not the district of community forest. So I'm saying that there is a network. We're collectively doing that at the BC Community Forest level, right? The messaging is all trying to be the same at this point. And then, like you say, this is the group that would drive that, right? We would, if we had some drive from all the town support, then we could probably take it to the
Yeah,
next
so
level.
supplemental to that is that I think it's needing the list of towns to coordinate that effort. So, and we've all seen it at this council, is when there's resolutions that have gone forward, is that it's asked for support in advance of UBCM. There's not a lot of meetings left, but to unify that voice, and so that, you know, that the letters are being written to support this particular motion. So there's a strategy in support. Otherwise, it's going to be Mayor Blackwell standing up there at the mic and looking for the pros and cons. And it's really uncomfortable. Something like this, you know, if it doesn't go through, should probably be put forward to the Southern Interior Local Government Association, and then would at least be endorsed by our region.
Right.
But we need more voices behind this. And it sounds like there's a willingness to do that, but how do we get
Yeah.
strategic about it?
I hear you. That's a challenge because not all communities wanted support as well. So,
Well, and that's an important thing. And if we don't know that, and then it, you know, some of the data is cited in here, that's when we get into problems. And that no mic looks really ugly.
So yeah, if we get a list from George of the other communities that might be at a similar vote
that are endorsing this.
endorsing that,
Okay.
then we'll put it forward, and then
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
coordinate with
Do
5 or
that.
6 at least other communities. Obviously, probably those communities won't have time to bring it to their councils, but at least they can write letters of support, and we could put it out the same way that places like Spell Machines send us letters and say, we would
Exactly.
wish you to support our motion at UBCM. So we do have a couple months before UBCM to do that, without asking them to pass a similar recommendation.
No, and that's right. It is the support. It would be good to have 3 or 4 that would be willing to sign on, and certainly having any First Nations that also talk about it. Because I think that the story about how that this has lifted our community up, and how that is the similar opportunity for First Nations, that tells a story that resonates with what the province is working towards. But
Yeah, it's just a disconnect sometimes between tenures branch and
well,
know,
once you
and,
get super
revenue
technical,
branch.
but that's why the story is really important.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and having that conversation with the MLAs and that. But I
Yeah.
think there's just work to be done. I just support doing more than just the motion.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you. Speaking of which, there is a motion. Does somebody want to move it?
I'll move
Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, George.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I was just in Victoria talking to Minister Josie Osborne, and she brought up the mayor. They hear him loud and clear in Victoria, and a big supporter of community forests. So really cool, right? Connections there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, yeah, I've heard the same thing from, yes. Anyways, that takes care of that. We're back onto the regular schedule of the agenda. There is nothing under items 8, items 10. So item 11, mayor's report. Council has on table. I'll just go through it a little bit here. Definitely over the last week or so, had a lot of discussions about road safety, with the accidents, alternative routes, and the length of time it took to have RCMP road traffic investigators make it up here. My understanding from Mayor Stamer is that the investigation into the Little Fort fatality required a crew to come out from Chilliwack because the Kelowna one wasn't available, which led to a time of somewhere around 11 hours before investigators were able to do that one. So I forwarded earlier today a Valemount Council request for a meeting with Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure to talk about passing lanes, particularly from Vaven B up through Blue River. But the Valemount extended that invitation, hoping that we would join in on that, and I pretty much figured you'd all be in favor of that, so I put that one back to them that yes, we would love to come to a meeting at UBCM on that. Also been working with Mayor Ward Stamer in discussions with MOTI on how alternative routes like West Side Road, Dun Lake Road, the road through to Whitecroft at Sun Peaks are used by people and are not being currently monitored when we have a blockage of Highway 5, which sends people into areas where they're unfamiliar and maybe not equipped to use some of those roads, as well as the issues stated earlier about RCMP, MOTI, and investigator response time. Mayor Stamer is trying to set up meetings on all of those, and we will co-attend as well. And if it's open to council as well, I will get an invitation for you to have a say in those as well. But he's just started working on that, but he's absolutely on fire on that one right now. So we'll let him be the pointy end of the stick for a bit and tag along on that. You have a comment, Councillor Sim?
I do. I just wondered who is our current area manager for roads?
Sam Pantaleo. He's been Pantaleo. He's been actually very good at the last little while. Sam has, the reason I've been able to send out updates generally before Drive BC gets them to council via email is because Sam has been very good about communicating with myself and Mayor Stamer and staff, I think to a certain extent, on these issues that they come up instead of going through standard channels. So we do have a fairly good relationship with them, and at this point he is willing to discuss improvements to traffic direction in these incidents. So at this point I don't necessarily know if it needs to go to the minister, but yes, Mr. Mayor Stamer and myself are kind of working through how to get this done. Okay.
So what I'm wondering is it worth having a meeting first with Sam as the mayors of the valley? And then I think that there needs to be some sort of a strategy, because I know that we haven't seen a ton of road upgrades for our riding.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to get the data collection about where other ridings are receiving that funding. And just to create that storyline, because, for example, our favorite little bumpity bumper part of the road, you remember the new improvement that now is the massive speed bump? It's a $6 million fix.
Yeah.
So how do we get that strategy to make that meeting, and how do we share the minutes knowing that, it didn't just go straight to the minister, it went through staff?
Yeah, and MLA Millibar has been doing a lot of that work and has been passing that on, and he has been looped into both meeting requests as well as the MLA for this region. Yeah, I think that's probably his office has access to things that we don't. So yes, he's looped into both requests on that. Okay. On Wednesday, June 8th, I attended the Community Forum in Chuchua. Great meeting, a lot of information, did another blanket exercise, which is always very powerful. McBride, Valemount, Barrier, Sun Peaks, and EA directors from up and down the North Thompson were all hosted by Símpcwemc. Trans Mountain did an update where they stated that work in Clearwater spread will be completed in late fall, with the camp closing end of November potentially, and shutting doors, starting to be taken apart. On Thursday the 9th, I did an interior health call talking about heat preparedness and other topics. Opioid crisis was mentioned as well. Radio interviews on flooding and preparedness. Wednesday, June 15th was agenda setting. Last Friday and Thursday and Friday was hospital board, TNRD regular board, and TNRD committee of the whole meeting. Lots of business there. Apparently interior health took that more scrubs was the biggest concern of nurses, but I can tell you for a fact that most board members were eager to correct them. Saturday, I got to puppy sit at the farmers market, which is probably the highlight of the week. And Sunday, I attended a Father's Day car show in Kelowna in the rain. And the only reason I mentioned that is really interesting driving around other places and seeing what arts, culture, and infrastructure they have kicking around. Because once you put those lenses on, that's all you look at. From now on. Councillor Bamford, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Pretty calm, well, a couple of weeks for me. The cemetery committee, which I mentioned earlier, and I'll report on a little bit later in the agenda. Had a meeting there. I want to thank our CEO for giving me feedback and attending the inaugural meeting of the retention committee. I was doing blood work stuff during that, so I had to miss that. I talked to him about it ahead of time and he sat in and he filled me in on it. So thank you very much. Had a conversation right before I came to council meeting for about a half hour in front of my driveway from a member of the public. And I briefly mentioned this to Mr. Smith, our fire chief, but it had to do with fire protection in Greer subdivision. And the concern is that Little Fort has storage tanks for water and Blackpool has storage tanks for water. The concern is the cycle time for a tank truck to come back down the hill, load up and get back up to Greer subdivision. So I told him that I would bring it up here and pass it on to the fire chief to look at the potential for a storage tank in Greer subdivision going into the fire season. The individual said he could put it on his property. The other thing I briefly discussed with him is if there's public access someplace or access through somebody's property to Candle Creek and the fire department has a volume pump and a volume pump with a 6-inch pump could fill up a tank truck fairly quickly. That would be another option in order to reduce the cycle time for a tank truck going into Greer subdivision where there isn't hydrants. So I brought that up. I'll leave that with Mr. Smith to look at in the future sort of thing. It's just something to consider, but I did inform him that we were equipping a wildfire trailer and we did have some bladders in that trailer, which would also assist in having a water supply for Wajax pumps and that type of thing. So I brought that up. So I'll leave that with Mr. Smith to just look into and give some consideration to. And the other thing was I did have a quick discussion with the mayor and some other people about the resolution for the community forest, and I just got done bringing that up. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councillor Bamford. Councillor Frizzle, go ahead.
Thank you. On June 15th, I attended the groundbreaking of the multi-use pathway at the Wells Gray Inn with several members of the Trails Task Force. So that was exciting to see that. I took a drive around to see all the trails that are started out here in front of the building and out at the Wells Gray Inn. And it's good to see things are starting to move and it's nice looking pathways are going to be there. So that was kind of fun. Had the seniors luncheon this month and we had the community paramedic there and I chatted with him afterwards and we discussed having a Let's Get Healthy fall, and we're going to have COPD workshop, a diabetes workshop, and an Alzheimer's workshop October, November, just to sort of get people back together and also making sure that they are understanding their health and have a support system. So I'm looking forward to doing that. June 15th was also World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And I attended a Zoom meeting with over 800 politicians and volunteers across Canada. And we discussed what is happening in every province, and every province is going through the same difficulties on how to alleviate abuse in the older generation, and reminding people that abuse is not just being hit, it's being financially hurt, it's being mentally hurt. It's a very widespread, difficult problem, and the politicians are putting money out there. So there's going to be different funding pockets that we'll be able to go after and be able to work on it. I'm working with the victim services next door, and we're going to be doing something in the fall over that too. So things are happening. As the mayor acknowledged that this is the National Indigenous People Day, and I would also like to give a shout out to Cindy Wilgosh because she has been working so hard on all the different events, and there's one happening right now down the hallway in the gym. There's going to be chili and bannock. We hope we can get some at the end of the meeting. And they're just highlighting dance and the goodness of Indigenous peoples. So I just wanted to put that out there, and that is my, oh no, sorry. Now I have a shout out for staff. I got a text from my son yesterday telling me, good job, Clearwater. And I'm like, what? He sent me a screenshot of Justin McElroy, who is a CBC reporter who goes and checks out communities, how easy it is to access the Sophie report, financial statements, and anything related to council. And he did it alphabetical order, obviously, because he said, despite having about 3% of the population of Chilliwack, our next municipality of Clearwater is infinitely more competent. Easily searchable council documents, Statement of financial information filed on time. Document is ready, easily searchable and clear to read. Simple stuff. So way to go, staff. Thank you very much. And that's my report.
Yes, thank you. We fed Justin McElroy a heck of a lot of hop and hog, so it wasn't a bribe for this last summer. But yes, he is the authority on tables, charts, lists, and municipal government when it comes to reporters in British Columbia. So that is a high compliment, to say the least. Councillor Herring is away at school. Councillor McKenzie is working night shift and is exhausted. Councillor Sim, you are up next.
Thanks very much. Just to echo the trails opening, which was really terrific. I was on a call this morning with some people from Revelstoke, and they stopped and they said, "Why is it that Clearwater is always doing great things?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of sitting on this meeting, and you guys never have any problems with nurses or doctors or hospital closures or anything. So, like, what's the deal?" And they said, "Do you know how awful it is to live here as a family? It's disgusting to walk your kids to school because there's no sidewalks. It's horrible to take your dogs for a walk. And the actual livability of what it is to be in a community, they really notice the absence of." And then talking about the seniors lunch, etc. And so there is all sorts of, wonderful nuances that, council, community, and staff all come together on, and it's recognized. And so while I had my own lens of envy, they also had their lens of envy. So it was really nice to be able to shout out about the work that's being done on those trails and the vision of the committee to connect a really large community. It is. And we talked about how some of those trails have been of benefit to get other projects like Evergreen Acres and the expansion, and how it's just a great can-do attitude and wonderful work done with grants. So thank you for that. Big week. It is graduation week. So we had the Eagles Nest daycare that had their graduation today. The Flex program had their graduation today. Grad is this Friday night, first time in person in 2 years. I think what's really touching about that is the grads got to vote on whether they wanted something smaller or whether to have it open to the community, and they chose to have it open to the community. So that's really great. The infamous grad parade is on Saturday at 2 p.m. Big congrats to the youth baseball team. We're seeing, or softball, so we're seeing some, nice uptake there and lots of enthusiastic people. Soccer ends this week. So it's going to be a bit of a shame to see, all those green t-shirts not running around anymore. And thanks so much to a number of our young teens that have been a part of it. That program is really successful because of that youth mentorship, and the kids really look up to the teens and think that that's great. And then just a shout out for the Ski Hill Social next Wednesday, the 29th at the Ski Hill. They want to show off their new deck. The fact that they've got one of those fancy remote control awnings that we hope to be using for sun, not rain. And it's live music. It's by donation. There's going to be some smokies on the barbecue, but it's really just to start the summer off because January has been awful.
What time is it at?
6 to 10.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. So I attended the Trails Task Force meeting last night. We had a representation from the Rec Sites and Trails BC department. They've gone through a lot of reduction in funding, let's say, to support trail development, and certainly requiring us to kind of look at options for the Triple Decker Falls Trail, I guess the river trail to Triple Decker Falls. We're still going to move ahead with that, maybe potentially some delay as we kind of work through Front Counter BC, which apparently has a bit of a backlog right now. But we're still very hopeful to keep moving forward with that one, but certainly adjusting. Well, there's been an adjustment of expectations in terms of roles and responsibilities there. So moving forward with that. And three of my items that I had down here have all been stolen by other council members. But I will give a shout out to staff for the river forecast emails that we've been receiving from Miss Lever. Really, really informative. It's great to kind of have that summary that we receive from her on a regular basis because, you know, obviously we're on flood watch and that information is really helpful. But yes, the other thing, thank you, Lynn, for caring so much about us, the seniors in our community, and demonstrating that care. And we hear your reports every meeting, and I just wanted to say thank you. And other than that, yes, happy Indigenous Peoples' Day. Congratulations to the grads, and end of soccer. What are we going to do? Well, I'm hopeful for hockey tournaments with the camp closing.
You have some Matt?
Yeah, just one quick thing, forgot to mention. The mayor and Councilor Frizzler and myself and the CEO attended our ribbon cutting for our backhoe right before this council meeting. And we babied that old backhoe for a long time. It's quite an amazing piece of equipment. It really is. It looks like it'll work really well, and we had a great deal on it. We saved money in the budget, so that's a good thing. So it was really good to do. Glad to see all the public works staff there.
It came in under budgets, and Barrier now has our problem. So we're good with that. Thank you all for those reports. Moving on to Committee of the Whole reports, Government Operations, Councillor Taylor.
So our next meeting is right now. That one always trips me up. So there's a recommendation that council enter a Committee of the Whole meeting of the Government Operations Committee. If I can.
Seconder on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Frizzle, all those in favor? Chair's over to you.
Thank you so much. So item 14.2, we have a financial update and a recommendation that we receive the financial report. So I'm going to assume I'm handing over to Director Klassen.
And yep, go ahead. Well, you're charging.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about the quarter ending March 31st first quarter financial statement update. The objectives of this presentation is to provide council with an overall update, both on financial bylaw as well as the projects. It provides the actual financials as they align with the budget, so we know where we're at. It encourages accountability. It provides financial transparency. And also it can help us reduce occurrences of unexpected results. If we're not reporting on a regular basis, sometimes there's risks that you may not know about, and it's important for council. Schedule A of the report provides council with an overview of the district's quarterly financial results compared to the budget. On this slide, you will see that this is only the revenue portion of that Schedule A. Please note on the bottom of the slide, I know it's difficult to see, but I'll help you through it. It's page 31 in the package. The 2022 financial plan was developed for the 12 months and is currently not distributed between the months. So when you see in the financial plan column, that is for 12 months. The first quarter represents only 3 months of activity. And we know that when we record revenue, it's not always the same per month, and sometimes all our revenue is recorded in 1 month. And just taking note that this was as of March, and at that time we had not approved the budget at the time, and so we had not calculated taxes, so you don't see the tax revenue at that point. The last column is the amount of budget remaining. So if everything was equal, we would expect to see about 75% budget remaining. Now you can see there's one line item that is about 57% remaining. What that means is actually we performed better than the budget at the time. And what that is a septic receiving. We're receiving more revenue from septic receiving than we have. in the budget. So on the, yeah, Schedule A, page 31, the top section is revenues. And you'll see, yeah, 57%. And in that is sales of service. And inside that sales of service category is many different categories. But the major one that is creating the better than budget performance at this time is the septic receiving. The budget for septic receiving is about 750,000 for the year. And in the first quarter, we received about $500,000. Oh, there's lots of, yeah.
Lots of good jokes now.
Yes, and that's what I'm trying, that's why. It is, but once revenue is a good thing. So if you're bringing in money faster than the budget, that's a good thing. And when you have disbursements that are faster than your budget, that's a bad. Yeah. So now I'm going to move on to the expenditure side or the expenses side. Same kind of logic, but in reverse, as Councillor Bamford has already alluded to. Our budgeted expenses without amortization is about $12.2 million. Our actual Q1 expenses are about 879,000 or about 7.2%. If everything was equal and we spent money equally throughout the whole year, we would expect that to be about 25%. So in general, a lot of our spending pattern is lower than the budget. And this is also, so here we have 3 categories, just to give you an example of how how I've identified the variances. So on the top arrow, there is a blue arrow. That one is about 77%, and that is the North Thompson Sportplex. They're basically trending as per the budget. They're right on budget. They're doing everything that needs to be. As well as fiscal services. So fiscal services represents interest that we pay on our debt. However, if you look at the principal debt principal payment is red, the red arrow there, what we've done there is we've made a big payment. We have one annual payment for the water system, and that was made in March. So that shows 50%, but we're not going to make that payment again in the year. It's all right. Another item, and we're going to allude to it when we go to the project, but the projects are about 35,000 we've spent on projects, capital projects, to a budget of 4.9 million. So I'm not going to go into the capital project report, but rather I'm just wanting to explain a little bit, explain the report itself. And this is Schedule B, page 32. Thank you. On the green section, if you see, look up there, in the green section of your report, that is your annual budget, your budget amendment, if applicable. The district currently has only one resolution for a budget amendment for the groundwater monitoring well for $30,000, and we'll see that come to council. The blue section represents your actual costs and the percentage remaining in the budget and the percentage complete based on dollars only. So this is only first quarter, so only dollars. And the purple section provides us with a schedule status. So how are we doing according to schedule? The budget status, how are we doing financially according to the budget, and any comments of interest. And that is always the interesting part of any project status report, is the details on the purple side. I mean, financially it's important too, but you really want to know what's going on. So as I mentioned before, as of the first quarter, we've spent 35,000 in projects to a budget of 4.9 million, and in operating projects, we spent 6,600 to a budget of 86,000. And as of last week, of the 38 projects, and this is where you can see the bright blue circle. Of the 38 projects that we have in the budget, we have 17 that are considered on schedule. We have 16 that we have not started. And we have 4 that is at risk. Now that's a little bit misleading because it's the toolcat, but it had 2 areas. So and it was a TMX crossing. Again, those are sewer and water, they were split. So those are really 2 projects, but they were split 4 ways. And then we have 1 at a schedule risk, and that is the Brookfield Bridge railing is considered a schedule risk. Are there any questions regarding the projects?
Questions regarding anything here? Counselors? Go ahead.
No, I'm supposed to be chairing. Councillor
right, never
Sim.
mind.
Thanks for the support, Mayor Blackwell. Councillor Sim.
Maybe not necessarily on projects, but I do want to go back to the great income coming in from the septic receiving. Where are those? Where are we keeping that extra money at the moment? Or where does it go? What
Where
are we
does it
gonna?
go?
Yeah.
It goes into unrestricted surplus. Because we haven't budgeted to receive that. So we have to stick to the budget. So just go into surplus.
To add to Director Klassen's comments, it will sit in the unrestricted surplus until council decides otherwise. And so one of the items on the policy consideration is reserve policy and how that fund is going to be managed. And so council will later on have an opportunity to direct the flow of those funds in different reserves or otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Bam.
Maybe just one quick question, only because of where I live, I see tank trucks filling up with water on a pretty continual basis. Is that money going into the water fund or the water reserve or whatever it is for the sale of the water?
Yes.
That's where it's going?
You'll see it as revenue, water revenue.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? No. Okay, move on.
So just moving forward, we have 1 recommendation for council to receive the quarter end March 31st financial report. And in Q2, our staff is planning to provide you with a budget or project forecast so we can see where we are going to be at the end of the year. As well as staff is going to provide you with a reserve continuity report so we can see where reserves are at that point. And then back to Q3, we'll just have the report we just saw today, and then we have year-end reporting.
Any other, sorry, CAO Thomas?
Just want to add to Director Klassen's comment that we're looking to standardize the reporting of the financial operation of the district to council on a consistent basis. And that will also be integrated with our corporate calendar.
Okay, so if there are no other questions from council of Ms. Klassen.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you so much, Mayor Blackwell. Can I get someone to second that recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Bamford. All those in favor? And that's passed. So thank you so much, Linda. So moving on to 14.3, the recommended priority for policies. This is the list that was shared before, and really looking for any feedback on this priority list or any omissions that we want to have added to this. Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, obviously, I think the question is more to staff is what do you see as the priorities on this right now? Obviously, reserve bylaw review is going to need to do that if we're going to take, well over $1 million in septic receiving fees. But emergency response, a lot of these seem to be things that were ongoing and are required work. Are there anything on this list that staff see because of the workload is available to be punted maybe into next year?
Yeah, my understanding is that they're in priority order based on staff input. But yeah, is there anything that should come off this list?
In the foreseeable future anyways for that.
CAO Thomas?
So the way I framed the prioritization recommendation was look at major policy development that's already on the go. So for example, the emergency response plan, the bylaw was adopted. We're still working on finalizing the draft plan, which will be coming back to council. That's well on its way. Procurement for parks contract, that's really a deliverable, not so much a policy item of council. We will act on that before the end of the year for sure. Asset retirement obligation is a major policy for the district because it ties into asset management plans, strategies, etc. that's currently existing. And I'll let other staff speak to that at different points as we go along. Budget policy and program review, or setting up the structure for what it looks like on an ongoing base. I think that's a really important one considering some of the challenges that we explored or experienced, the last budget cycle. Consolidated fees and charges bylaw is important, but in the grand scheme of things, I think council procedure bylaw, which is at the core of governance, would take priority over that. This was a recent addition in the last council meeting. So I would recommend for sure the council procedure bylaw be moved very far up that list of prioritization. Followed by the reserve bylaw, which as I mentioned before, is quite important for council to direct the flow of reserve planning and management for the district. Those are just some examples.
Councillor Sim?
So in terms of the priorities, I noticed that council procedures bylaw is recommended as number 11.
That was a recent addition from the last council meeting. I'm recommending that be moved further up the priority.
Yeah, so I just wondered, did you have did you want to name that position now, or sort of like a game show?
5
I
and
could-
6, 6 and 7.
I'm going to go for maybe even 1 or 2, given the timelines of how many meetings are left. And I think that we really need to let our public know what our meeting structure is going to look like for the fall. So that's my input.
Any other thoughts from council on where we prioritize that piece?
Yeah, no, I think I would agree that it needs to be up at the top. I'm seeing basically the top 4 items are floating around in business anyways. And if we throw it into that pool and deal with it, and then there's a few things that we need to deal with before we get to election, that I think this is one of those. If staff has the time, and if not, we bring on more people.
So I think I might have misunderstood your comment. So it's not a priority?
No, I think it should be within the top. The top 4 things are basically underway as
Right.
things go right now. So if we add it as the 5th thing floating in the top 4 pool, because you could make it priority 1 or number 2, but since all of those things are already ongoing, the top 4 items is basically, we just say that it's one more thing that needs to be ongoing.
So
or
maybe a
happening
better
now.
way, because I think we've only got a July 12th meeting and an August meeting, right? So to me, it's not even priority, it's a deadline. Could we have a recommendation by the August meeting? Is that too
Sounds
bold?
like a workshop that we need in the next, but noting that the CAO is going on holidays
Yeah.
for a bit here, but maybe a recommendation for the August meeting.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
just wondering sort of for deadline, because I think we have to have that because September is going to be
So look, I think you've sort of identified where it needs to be in priority. I would agree that it needs to be within the top 4 or 5. We'll put that back to staff as something to let them see how they can manage that. And they can get back to us maybe. But yes, identifying that we need to do that, accomplish that before the election period.
Okay. So any other thoughts or comments on the list of priorities, or with the shift of the council procedures bylaw up to being with that top 4? Are we aligned and comfortable to move forward with the priorities recommended by staff? I believe so for within this committee of the whole. Yes.
Yes, I'm good with that. If staff has any further comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think you require, sorry, CAO Thomas.
I just had a quick sidebar with Director Klassen, who highlighted in September or thereabouts, discussions about budget will be starting. So the importance of the budget policy would also be relevant. So I would recommend that council consider a deadline for August for both at least a draft of the council procedure bylaw and a draft framework for budget setting for Clearwater.
Any concerns from council? Seeing none. So I think we'll be aligned with that. So we've put an August deadline on both draft budget policy and draft council procedures bylaw. Okay, if there's no other concerns on the government operations portion of this list, then if someone could recommend that we rise from the committee of the whole.
So moved. Seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor? And back to you.
And then I turn it over to Councillor Bamford for the next recommendation.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be on August the 16th, but there's a recommendation that council enter a committee of the whole meeting of the Community and Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee. So I need a motion and a seconder on that. Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Let's go carried. And 14.5 is a draft of cell number 1, phase 2 public procurement package. I will turn that over to staff for that presentation. It is part of your package starting on page 36.
Thank you, Chair Banford. I will ask and invite Mr. Crow, who is the district's engineer, to speak on the grants that the district received. I believe 2 years ago at this point, the status of the available funds, which is in the neighborhood of $400,000, and the projects we hope to accomplish with phase 2 of cell 1 project. Mr. Chris Carl.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, I believe we've spoken about this project a couple of times in the last couple of years related to the best use of the remaining funds for the wastewater plant, while also being in alignment with work that would be satisfy the grant criteria. There's specific uses that the remaining funds can be used for. So what we have right now proposed is, as discussed previously, it's focused on sludge management, and it will be creating a sludge drying area, a lined sand. There's a low density polyethylene liner along with a sand liner, so as to allow for sludge drying and a collection system, so that the liquids generated by that drying exercise could be ran back through the headworks of the plant. There's also miscellaneous items included, such as winterizing a couple of the low lift pumps and safety ladders for the existing aerated lagoons. Just a couple of smaller I guess you could call them miscellaneous items that were flagged as issues over the last year or two or three. So that would be the primary focus if budget did allow. There's a couple of other miscellaneous items that could be added back in to the project, but with inflationary construction costs over the last year or two related to various construction materials and fuel prices and things like that across the construction industry, we wanted to keep the scope to something that we thought was doable within the budget while also allowing for it to be completed this year. So that's where we've settled. There are other obviously wastewater plant items that could be added in the future should we desire through capital project funding. But right now the scope is primarily the sludge management and the miscellaneous cleanup items, if you will. Hopefully that makes sense.
Are there any questions of staff? Prior to that, I have one, but I'm just curious if anybody else has some. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. My question, and apologies, I have terrible memory. Cell 1, phase 1, was that funded through grant funding? And that's why we kind of need to keep the 400,000 savings still on cell 1, or was it more of a choice like that? Those savings couldn't be redirected to other projects or initiatives, or is it just that cell 1 remains that priority?
Yeah, that's the name of the project, was cell 1. If you remember, we converted the old facultative lagoon to the aerated treatment lagoon. That was cell 1. That project's done in function, and there's budget remaining within the grant. The purpose of phase 2 is to, okay, the dust is settled on phase 1. We have this remaining budget based on the criteria available under the grant funding. And we've gone back to the grant funders to ensure that the items as proposed are acceptable, and they've given us the go ahead based on this second phase and the items outlined.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, specific in your report to, there's comments about the cost of sludge disposal. Can you maybe just explain that to council, that one of the reasons that this is a good idea is that, you know, those costs are getting rid of the remaining sludge, et cetera, is harder to do, or the leftover materials from this process. And we probably, my feeling is that we'd be better off handling this locally as much as we can. Is that what we're getting at here?
Yeah, and if we remember back to some discussions we had last year about this, is how much we're paying to transport water, essentially. So this allows it to dewater as best as possible. That was before fuel prices took the jump that they've taken in the last year. So it's that much more of a business case for trying to manage that. And the sludge drying area, it'll act as twofold as well. If in the future the district decides to desludge one of the aerated lagoons, this sludge management area would allow for that in the future. It would mean that we, you know, it would have limited space for the sludge, the day-to-day sludge drying, but it would also allow for the future. That's a maintenance task, but it would allow for that future maintenance to occur more efficiently.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions of from council to Chris? Councilor Sims.
If this is approved and we've got people on the ground there, is it going to be more expensive as if we did other projects subsequent, or would it be more cost effective to do it while they're there? And I just look at some of the surpluses that we talked about, and just making sure that we're not missing opportunities to capitalize on projects that are going on. So why go back to the street intersection twice if we can save some money?
what specific type of projects would you be referring to? Just
You know what, that is
thinking-
so out of my scope. I'm looking at the expert up there, but I mean, it seems to me that these types of projects have always come with a long list of potential opportunity savings. So if we're going to move forward on something like this, is there anything else that we've got the experts who are going to be there? Should we act on them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Councillor Sim. Essentially, is there economies of scale to increase the scope and get other things done? There are other items that the wastewater plant could use, but they're not available under this grant budget remaining. So I don't think like the blower room, for example, needs air conditioning added to it as a result of the addition of the blowers and the heat in there. That's quite different from the sludge drying. One's more of an earthworks liner pipe exercise. One is more of a structural mechanical type exercise. If you combine them, would you get, you may get economies of scale by combining those as opposed to splitting them out. But honestly, construction costs this year are becoming very, very hard to estimate or try and say, yeah, you'll save money here or it'll cost more there. It's really hard to say anything with confidence related to how we could or should save money right now, just with the way costs are with construction. I'm sure you guys see it with anything right now. Everything's just high. So there may be, but I can't say for sure on that. So sorry if that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but it's not a straightforward thing, just with all the like macro factors at play that we're seeing right now.
No, thank you for the consideration. That's great.
Any other questions for Chris? I'm seeing none. Chris, I have a couple of quick questions for you.
Yeah.
Now that other council is done. On page 37, there's a cost for $410,000. And on page 40, there's appear to be the concrete drying bay for $382,000. Are those two separate projects or is one already completed? I'm just concerned that we've got $400,000, but there appears to be $700,000 worth of work in this report. So maybe you could clarify that for me. I'm just not sure, or staff maybe can, what the two different costs are.
Sure. I think I know, like, I don't have the council report in front of me, but I can see the two numbers you're talking about. One is those are from February 2021 and one's from September 2021. And they're talking about different items. Last fall, we were contemplating the addition of that blower room air conditioning. So that's in that 410. If you see there, such as item 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.2 mechanical upgrades, 2.3 structural upgrades, that's about 80,000. And if you compare what was included in the original one before, like there's an adjustment of items, I guess, between those. Those are not apples to apples comparisons, those two. And what we're proposing now is again slightly different based on trying to modify the scope to stay under the available budget.
Okay, so that's fine. So these are just reflections of costs of different projects, but what we're trying to do is modify it in between there, but the cost will be under the 400,000 that we have. And also given there's a contingency built in, I'm comfortable with the contingency built in because in the past we've had unknown costs that tend to arise, but with that contingency, it looks like any of those unknown things that would arise would be covered at least.
I want to say yes.
So
we've done a lot of work there in the last couple of years. We're pretty comfortable with what's there, and we're not going to run into surprises in the scope of what we're proposing. So I'm safe with saying that I think that contingency is acceptable. Yes.
Thank you. And the last quick point, and as just to follow up maybe to Councillor Sim's concerns or thoughts, given the money that we have and the increase in the septic receiving station, I think she's saying, is there something now while we have, or do you suspect in the future costs will go down or costs going to keep rising? And if we have the money now, is there something we should be looking at while we have the money to try to get it done? I don't know if costs are ever going to go down, but I think that's what she was alluding to. Is there any sort of benefit of moving ahead with some of those other things down in that same area, given we have some money sitting there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Outside
similar
the scope of the
question.
project, yeah.
Yeah, and I might refer to Mr. Thomas on like the increase in scope related to that question, specific to the cost increases and whether things will go up or down. I'm not sure. Every time I think we're leveling off, you know, another project budget comes in and it seems to be higher. It just seems to be ongoing even in the last month or two. Not just District of Clearwater jobs, I'm talking just construction jobs in general seem to continue to be going up. Whether or not they start coming down in next year, and if you did the same job next year, would it be cheaper? I hope so, but your guess is as good as mine. But yeah.
Chris, if I
Anyway,
may.
Chris, no, thank you. That's good. We have enough projects on the go anyway, I think. So, and see, Mr. Thomas.
I agree with your comment there, Councillor, or Chair Banford. What I would recommend, if Council is open, we could take the question back to consider what other projects could occur in the lagoon area. We will obviously consult with Chris Crowell, and we can bring back a list to Council. Please keep in mind, many of those projects will require substantive planning processes, which will likely be the rest of the year and will probably fall into budget 23.
Okay. So that's all. And thank you, our CEO, and thank you, Chris. Any other questions of Chris or anything else before we move ahead? Thank you for your report. And given that, that'll take us to recommendation at the end of this, that council rise from a committee of the whole. Sorry, Mr. Thomas.
Sorry, Chair, do you wish to speak to the prioritization list for Community and Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee? Thank you for your help, Chris, by the way.
Chris?
So yeah, looking at this, I'm pretty comfortable with it. The one thing looking at it is given we've talked about it a couple of times, 0.5 on that, which is a fee review for sewage disposal. I'm not sure whether that shouldn't be higher because we're continually looking at ways to increase revenue, which is one ways to limit taxation. So given that, we're continually supporting a lower rate fee where other communities are bringing their stuff here simply because it's cheaper. Personally, I'd like to see that maybe a little bit higher on the thing, simply because it does deal with revenue. And I look at it saying it might be a fairly quick process by finding out what some of the other fees are in other communities and having a recommendation come to council just to change the fees. So
I wait for direction.
what does council feel that that's worthwhile pursuing that or not? Since I think it might be a fairly quick process. Council thoughts? Mayor Blackwell.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a fairly simple process of doing a survey of other areas, I mean, there's not too many people that are in this business other than the TNRD, us, maybe Salmon Arm, 100 Mile House locally, or the Caribou CRD. So I mean, even if we did a 3 or 4 organization comparison and brought that back to just do a quick reset for now of where our fees align without getting into it too deeply, that might be okay. But yeah, I do agree that if people are willing to truck stuff over from the Caribou or up from Kamloops, we've got a problem.
So it sounds like council is acceptable that direction, provided it doesn't take too much staff time. Any other points on that from the rest of council? Seeing none, I think that concludes that. And then we'll go back to the recommendation that we rise from the committee of the whole. No motion for that. Now, Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. All in favor? And thank you. And I'll turn that over back to Mayor Blackwell.
And I turn it over to Councillor Sim.
This really is a party game that's past the thing. So recommendation that council enter a committee, the whole meeting of Parks, Recreation
So
and
moved.
so great.
Seconded by. Is that how it works? Okay.
You know, he's just new at this.
So I seconded then. Did you call
And
the
now
question?
I say all in favor.
Look at that.
Mhm.
Cool. I'm in favor.
So this item came out of the recruitment and retention meeting. We had a really, really good discussion amongst ourselves. We had the Clearwater Health Center, or Community Health Center there. The hospital was there. Mr. Thomas was there, and Dr. Souls made an appearance. And we just talked about a variety of the recruitment and the retention issues that are not only facing Clearwater, but British Columbia, Canada, and how are we going to be nimble in addressing it? Because if we have to bring everything through this committee, we probably need to have a broader scope of a plan of things. And I just share a couple of things that have happened just in the last week. Today, the provincial government made an announcement that for new to practice contracts, anybody who's just graduated who wants to sign on, they can receive a contract for $295,000 plus a $25,000 signing bonus, up to $50,000 debt forgiveness in the first year, and then $20,000 in years 2 to 5. And while this sounds very exciting, it wasn't necessarily put through Doctors of BC. It doesn't talk about what communities will be put in order. And we're potentially looking at kind of a free-for-all. We're also looking at maybe people attaching themselves. And then how do they find communities is another thing. So I have to agree with some of the people that are speaking about this, that it seems like a bit of a Band-Aid. It doesn't mean that we don't have to look at how are we going to attract attention. And it's not just doctors, we address that it's nurses as well. We also have to look at the fact that just down the road, Kamloops has been approached by their hospital to look at, physician enhancement opportunities. Mayor Christian was very good in the fact that he said, look, we can't be robbing our neighboring communities, so it should be a regional strategy. Do we have the money to be sitting at that type of table, which is what this item is all about. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Thomas because he is more eloquent in this next stage. Well, what next? Because you always have a plan and a vision. And
Teamwork. I have a team of people that supports this process.
okay,
In the Recruitment and Retention Committee, there was a recognition that the turnaround time from idea, vision, and execution could be streamlined. And so with the district earmarking funds through the budget process, the question is, does it need to come back to council for granular authorization? Staff is obviously open to direction from council, but I would recommend that there is a way to streamline that process.
Mayor Blackwell.
I would say it doesn't need to come back to council. We've set a budget. If we get to the point where we're going to need to add to that budget or find funds elsewhere, that's another question. Or if we are burning through that budget at an accelerated rate. But this is an awful lot like economic development that you need to strike when the iron is hot. And I really think since we have already agreed to a budget on this, it should be a simplified, straightforward process if that's at all possible.
Mr. Thomas, would you have anything to add to that? That seems like an endorsement for moving forward.
I think next step, staff could prepare some guidelines for how to implement those things and bring that back in what month of July. If that's okay.
Yeah, I will note that one of the areas that communities are getting to be very strong on in terms of recruitment, and again, this is for all healthcare professionals, X-ray techs, everything, is the assistance with rents, whether that be for the first 3 months, is that there's an aid to help people come and relocate. Certainly physicians are looking at something like that, just because it takes. We have Dr. Phillips who's arriving in August. It's going to take her probably 6 months to get up to speed. At that time, she will be paying for her student loans. She will be paying for a number of costs, and her billables may not be particularly high. Other communities are offering this, so she's coming here under a different contract. But we will need to consider where we want to be on the game board. And I think it's going to exceed the budget that we do have if we're going to be serious players at it. Because last time we did this, it was just physicians. Right now, we really need to look at our nurses and all of the key players. Definitely, if we're going to see some housing pressures released, that will help. but we're still looking at a smaller pool to draw upon and how we promote our community and what we do. So I would suggest that there's going to be a need to have some changes in the budget if this becomes a priority of council. Mayor Blackwell.
Agreed. No, I'm hearing the same things that you are. You know, as far as particular assistances like rent and that sort of thing, these are items that come up as needed. But having lots of discussions around the TNRD table unofficially in the last hospital board meeting, just the enormous sucking power of Kamloops to draw in professionals. One of the only thing that's saving us at this particular time is that Kamloops houses prices are just as horrendous as ours are right now. But places like Kelowna, rent and mortgage payments, rental availability and things like that are half the price of Kamloops. So if we're looking at a region, there are places that are more attractive than us, especially related to the housing market. And then there goes on to your regular comments about the livability of community. So I think we're going to have a deeper look at this item as far as funding moving forward. And I think because of some of the other things going on with income and that sort of thing, some of the stuff we target towards this in the way of additional funds, we have that opportunity in the short term now to shore that up with the additional septage receiving income and that sort of thing, not wanting to spend it before it's in the bank. Yeah, I think there's an opportunity there.
Thanks very much. I think that those are sage comments because they do look at a regional strategy. We do have to recognize that our hospital and our on-call situation sometimes doesn't rank us in the top 10. I know that that's shocking, but it's a bit of a draw there. I would suggest that one of the things that had come up at the meeting was that we used to have a website called Hug a Doctor in Clearwater. It was suggested that we have something of a recruitment opportunity under the district banner. And that could easily bring together like Tourism Wells Great, like everything that's promoted in various ways can also be hit on that social media stream, because what people are looking for is a home. So just to have an ad isn't enough. It's enough. We need to introduce the community to, the potential audience. And I know that when our recruitment video went out, that was shared widely. It was really, really well received. Is it time to do something new to reintroduce the community to other potential people? I think there is. So yeah, definitely a broad strategy, and I appreciate the support and the endorsement of future discussions. And with that, do we need anything? Do we need a motion? Oh, strategy. They are so boring. There isn't a swag bag on here. So the admin recommended. The only thing I see on this that we've just discussed is this strategy of recruitment. And should that be on there? Because that is going to take some time. It is going to need looking at in terms of what's it going to do to add to our website. Mr. Thomas, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm open to whatever direction council wants me to go. I think a recruitment and retention strategy is, if this is the focus of the Parks, Recreation and Social Development Committee, then that's what we'll work on, for sure.
Did you, Councillor Taylor, did I see your hand? No.
You sure?
Mayor Blackwell?
I was gonna, no, go ahead. I was actually gonna poke the rest of you to have some comments on this because this is important stuff.
After the conversation, I think it's important that that does become a priority.
Okay.
We do have to make it a priority. It's something we've talked about and we keep talking about. So let's do something.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Blackwell?
Nope, just poking.
The only other one, and because it's social development, is the one thing that I think that we as a community could do better at is diversity. and we've seen this a lot, and we've seen it transpire in communities, world politics, all of it, is that when we talk with the same mindsets, we just get to be reaffirmed. Having more diversity and finding ways to open up different avenues of discussions, I think enriches our social fabric, because we hear differing perspectives. We hear things that cause us to go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. So in terms of that social development, I think that we've been really, really fortunate in the way, in the benefits of people who are choosing to come to our community, but we can do better. I would say that there's lots to be done on, you know, some cultural work, but I don't see that as a priority, and I would like to see it as a priority. Is what does that mean? And I don't know, I feel really clumsy in this area. I feel nervous, I feel scared, I feel like I'm gonna trip over my words and I'm gonna insult somebody, but I know that the way that we're going isn't going to get us to where we need to be. So that would be my other contribution there. And I would be willing to take off a couple of the things there to make room for that. Councillor Banford?
Yeah, no, my only, looking at the list, I don't have a problem with the discussion that we've had here in the least. My only question on the list is, when you look at the policy and bylaw, and I know bylaws are a lot of work, we've kicked around a tax exemption thing. And I'm just curious from our economic development officer, whether or not having a tax exemption policy or something is a huge benefit in relationship to drawing new businesses into a community. Is that something that we really need to look at or push forward, or are we kind of doing okay? From somebody from staff anyway, I'm curious on how effective that actually is as a recruitment thing or a enhancement thing to come to a community. We've been kicking us around for years and had draft policies from other communities and stuff, so.
Do I think that they're a valuable tool to bring businesses here? The permissive tax? Yeah, no. There are other issues that we have that I think need to be focused on. That to me wouldn't be, from an economic development perspective, wouldn't be a priority.
Okay.
If I may add, that's not to say it's not important. I think what I'm hearing from the economic development officer is there are some additional items that will support a stronger foundation to get to the point of looking at the tax exemption bylaw in attracting businesses.
Sorry for the confusion there. Permissive tax exemptions are typically just for nonprofit organizations. So that's why it would really be helpful for a business. But if you wanted to attract business to a certain core, there are certain exceptions out there that we could do a report on, and we can provide it back to council if that's something council would look at. But
I think that there's also been the discussion around revitalization.
That's where Councillor Banford was going.
Exactly what I'm.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
that's what I was alluding to. It's a revitalization tax
Okay.
exemption, but it has to be provided through council. You need a bylaw. You need to have all your bylaw and the plan in place and area, exactly which area you would like to have it as an exemption.
That's a lot. Can we just go back to swag? That is far more fun. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it might be for business and economic development into the area.
Yeah. So in comments to Parks, Recreation and Social Development, just looking at those, the second floor expansion study is something that is budgeted for. So we have that. It seems it would be interesting to see how we could maybe get a better use of space. So there's something there. Related fees and charge bylaws. I don't know. Are these priorities? Yeah. For me, it's recruitment, retention, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece that I would like to see added there, and then see what falls out after.
I'd agree on the related fees and charges. I think we could probably push that off one calendar year. We're pretty much against the wall on that one. And as long as there's nothing on there that anybody's objecting to for it being too high or too unreasonable, I do believe the curling club had some issues with some stuff, but I don't think it's, I could see pushing that off for another year. Until we have more time. And advertising and sponsorship review, I think a lot of that be under Mr. Mayor's to look at, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think he would. And I think that that could probably be attended to, but in terms of creating a culture of where people want to come, to me, those need to be added in, please. Mr. Thomas?
Just for clarification, is the will of the committee to recommend to council the strategy for recruitment and retention first and diversity, equity, and inclusion number 2?
I'm the only one that spoke about the diversity piece, so Councillor Frizzle's on board with that. Mayor Blackwell?
I think that there's some business in here on the list that needs to be accomplished, is already underway. I think we still need to keep track of that in the top. I think diversity is a conversation for a workshop or part of a workshop before we get to election is fine. But if we don't have any distinct direction or goals with it right now, I think we need a workshop or a separate council discussion to figure out what that is. But yes, having it there is something that we talk about, definitely. A priority of Parks and Rec and social development, other than saying, let's talk about it in the near future. I don't know where to go with that without knowing what we're really doing with that.
So, I think those are really great questions. And I think for me, because we don't know what we're doing, we need to bring in people who do know what they're doing. And I don't know if that's a workshop, or as an education piece that starts, planting the flowers. I know I just need some more information. As I said, I feel clumsy in that arena. I don't feel confident. And I think if I were to ask for anything, it would be misaligned. And I don't want to do that. I'd like to hear from some people that have had some other experience in other communities. And we hear that. I look to Bella Coolit has done some great jobs. On the island, they've done some really good work. And I just think that there's other people out there. So even just calling in, doing a Zoom call and having a guest speaker or something, just help give some definition about what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like? What does it look like? What are some communities doing? That's where I'm at. So does that give you enough direction, Mr. Thomas? Sorry, I'm super bad at it.
How about this?
No, I want to hear from Mr. Thomas. Thanks.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead if you want, but I'm basically thinking you've just said what you want, which is a guest speaker on this in the next 3 months. On somebody to talk to us about diversity, inclusion, whatever. That's fine. That's a starting point.
Thomas, anything?
We'll do some research, set up a workshop, and try to make it happen.
Great, thank you. And with that, motion to rise from the committee. Great, seconded. All in favor? And we're done. Thank you.
Ooh. Okay, thank you for that. A lot of discussion there. Standing committee reports, Joint Services Advisory. Next meeting is no longer going to happen. Select committee reports, Trails Task Force, Councillor Taylor.
So I already mentioned that we had a meeting last night, and the next meeting is July 12th.
Thank you. Community Economic Development Task.
The last meeting, I said the meeting will be in August. It has been moved back to July 13th. That's good.
Thank you. Cemetery Advisory Committee, Councillor Bamford.
Our next meeting is June 28th, and I gave a bit of an update at the beginning of council meeting. So we're kind of looking at 2 meetings a month. Moving forward to have something to council sort of in September, so we can get a recommendation for the council to look at change the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Staff reports. Committee representation reports. Tourism Wells Gray, Councillor Sim.
Nothing to report. They have posted the position for the executive director. They've got about 4 or 5 applications, including one local. And they will be moving forward on that. In the meantime, the interim person to help, Kirsten Alchin, is doing a great job. And by all accounts, the information center is busy. It's so busy. It's nice to see that activity there.
Thank you. Wells Gray Community Forest Commission, Councillor Bamford.
Nothing to report at this time.
Yeah, thank you. Staff reports, disposal of assets policy, 169 to 182 in your agenda. Policy, I'll let staff speak to that. It's been highlighted in there, the extras on there. The improvements. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So you'll notice on page 169 of your package. So after the April 5th council meeting, when there was the discussion regarding the disposal of assets policy, CAO Thomas asked me to do some research on this topic. And so included in the information before you is some of the areas that we looked at in terms of bylaws and policies, including other municipalities, the provincial sort of senior government, to look and see what examples that we had from other communities and what was currently considered best practices. From that, we looked at some protocols and some specific wording regarding the disposition of assets and how it was managed. What we found in a lot of cases of best practices was that it had been included in your procurement or purchasing policies. And so what we're proposing here is including the disposition of assets within the existing purchasing policy, policy number 2201. We're proposing a name change to that policy. We've, as well as an attachment, a form, an asset disposal form is Schedule A, which in your package is noted on page 182. And then in the revised proposal, the revised policy in front of you, the changes have been noted in red, but in general, we've updated the principles. We've added specific definitions to look at the terminology around the disposal of assets. And then we've added an entire section. So section 8, the disposition of surplus assets. One question that we've asked is in the current policy, purchasing policy of section 5.2, the CAO currently has a purchasing limit of 100,000. In 8.2 of the disposal of assets, we have noted that the CAO's limit is 50,000. And so we're asking for clarification on that, where the pleasure of the council would be on that.
Thoughts of council on this? So just correct me if I'm wrong. The 8.2 is asset disposal of 50,000. Is that the same as the 100,000 category, or I thought it was purchase? Not.
The 5.2 is purchase.
Yeah.
8.2 is disposal.
So you can buy more without approval from council, then you can sell without approval from council.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Taylor, did you have a thought on that?
Not on that. I was going to clarify, but Mr. Councillor Bamford did it.
Other thoughts of council? What would work best for staff? I know direction of council, but let's get real. What
Comment. Good comment.
what actually is a workable solution for staff?
It's a really tough balance in that, because I go back to the tobacco, which I guess is the genesis of updating the policy. I think heads would turn if the CAO was unilaterally making a decision to sell tobacco for $40,000 without a council resolution. And so I personally think a threshold of $50,000 is high, and I would recommend somewhere between 25 and 30 as a middle ground. Because 8.2 specifically allows the CAO to execute on an asset deemed surplus sale without a resolution of council to endorse that.
Okay, and that was the concern of council before, okay? So $30,000, you 25, what basically 1/4 of purchase power. Thoughts, Councillor Taylor? Do you think you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, just my thought is that they're two very different things. Sale and purchase. I don't think they have to be aligned. I mean, I guess the risk is obviously not a currency area, but somebody could choose to sell a very valuable asset for a very small amount of money, or a smaller amount of money. Like, and so like the control is there really. I don't think they have to be aligned. I don't think that, in my mind, they're two completely separate actions happening. And I think it's okay for us to have completely different limit there.
And further to that, Councillor Taylor, what would be your thoughts on a reasonable limit? Well, I've got you on the topic.
I'm supportive of the 25,000 proposed.
Councillor Bamford, you had a thought?
Yeah, just a quick question. In all cases, the Schedule A would be filled out anyhow, which takes 2 signatures, which is a financial officer and the chief administration officer. So as a due diligence thing, that would be on record anyhow. So there'd have to be agreement for the sale of that regardless of the value that it's set at. So that gives me a certain feeling of comfort. So.
Other thoughts, Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I just want to, I found that Councillor Taylor's comments on this when this was brought forward were really insightful, and you had a good overview. And so I just want to I want to lean to however you're going, because I thought you were fairly fabulous.
Valley.
So just to hear, because I liked your perspective and your work experience and everything, you brought a good take.
I'm supportive of the lower amount proposed, and yeah, it doesn't raise concerns for me that there's a differentiation there.
Thank you. Further comments from anybody?
So, sorry,
Go ahead.
I have another comment on wording of the principles, so not related to the amount. So under principles section 2.2, it says where and when possible, assets must be disposed by recycling, repurposing, or trade-in, but it doesn't list sale. Should I worry about that not being included within? I mean, I know that the idea of the principle is that we're not sending things to landfill, but then are we closing ourselves off to sale if we say where and when possible, sale of the asset isn't listed there?
We can certainly add that as point number 4.
Okay.
You've been elevated from fairly to like totally.
Thank you. Thank you for that. If there's no further comments, that there's a recommendation that council approves the updated policy with the amendments that have just been added by, or suggestions that have been added by council. What's the wish of council? Somebody want to move that?
I can move that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Seconder on that, Councillor Sim. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you.
And has that been moved with the limit to be established at 25,000?
Yes, that is correct. Item 18.2, fire department equipment and personnel policy. Mr. Smith, come on down.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. So back in October of 2021, staff was directed to develop a policy to guide deployment of municipal fire equipment before the next fire season starts, which ultimately hasn't been yet. So in researching other policies or other municipalities, there wasn't a lot to go on. Not sure why, but there's a interagency agreement between the Fire Chiefs Association, the Fire Commissioner, and BC Wildfire. So that guides how they ask municipalities for personnel, equipment, apparatus. So we've used that to develop this policy. Basically, that's what guided us. And there was one other policy that was out there that we use as well as guidance. So So if now BC Wildfire and Fire Commission Office sends out a letter yearly asking for fire departments to update their list if they have equipment or personnel that they would like to deploy if such resources are required. And then under their agreement, it lists all their requirements on what you need to have, the training, how they'll ask you, how they'll deploy you, how they'll release you, and their code of conduct and all those different types of aspects for that. So our policy, if I go to it, sorry, so we've listed our principles, objectives, applications, and exceptions. So this will apply to requests from the Office of Fire Commissioner and BC Wildfire. And it doesn't apply where mutual aid firefighting agreement exists already with TNRD. So this is basically just for deploying with the province. We decided to have a deployment area, so about 200-kilometer range from Clearwater, just for a starting point, just so that we aren't too far away from the town. Just we have to realize our needs here first, our staff on our fire department, because they ask for a 2-week operational period. And that's a lot of time to commit elsewhere, right? So, and this, we can list our apparatus available. We don't have to go when they ask us to go, right? So we can say, no, we don't have the personnel, we don't have the equipment. Conditions here are, we need our stuff here, basically is what it is. This just allows a policy to guide staff when they do ask us if we do register with them. So.
Any questions of Michael on this? It's Fire Chief Smith. Go ahead, Councilor Bamford.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Smith. Just regarding 5.8, the decision to renew a deployment period shall be in accordance with 2.1. And 2.1 basically states the district may wish to assist other community in times of need after ensuring the local commitments can be met. Any idea what a deployment period may be? Is it 2 weeks? Is it
It's
5
up to
days?
it's up to 2 weeks.
So if in that 2-week period, an incident occurred here where we had 8 days of extremely high temperatures and we went into an extreme hazard and your position had changed, are we locked down to that deployment period, or does this allow us to call those resources back earlier if it's a full 2-week period, or do we want to look at something shorter?
So you go by how they ask you. So it's there when they ask you to come or to deploy, it's in their agreement to state the terms. So in not necessarily being a part of any deployment periods, I can't say if releasing resources is easy, but I would imagine that a very good conversation between the incident commander and us would possibly be able to release the resource, but I can't speak for them. So,
and that would obviously be in your bailiwick because you're the one who's going to agree to it, sort of thing. And I was just curious in that deployment period, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things can change in 2 weeks.
Definitely, yeah.
Other questions?
If I
Oh,
may.
go ahead,
And
Mr.
to add
Thompson.
to Chief Smith's comments, Councillor Banford, if a request is made to renew the deployment, we will go through the same due diligence process of checking what are the conditions locally here immediately and in that time period requested as well, and make a judgment call at that point.
I was just curious if there's an out in the middle of that. That's all.
It's something we have flagged in our discussions, and it's something we're going to continue to monitor.
It's just a comment, so that's all.
Thank you. Further questions? Go ahead, Councilor Frizzle.
So when you're asked to deploy, is it 2 weeks or can it be just a week?
It could be a day. It
It could
depends
be a
on
day.
what they require, right?
2 weeks is the maximum.
Like example last year when Kamloops had their big fire, I know Blackpool and I think Bainby went down for the night just for the ease of and comfort to citizens, right? So it could be a day, 5 days, 2 weeks. It's all depending on the conditions. You know, if the fire gets kind of wrapped up, they realize that structure firefighting resources are required back in their home bases. So they try to release those resources as soon as they can. They don't like to tie them up unnecessarily. And because they're also paying for them too, right?
Councilor Bamford, you have further?
Just another quick question is for Chief Smith. We just went through that idea of facilitating basically a wildfire trailer with pumps and bladders and that type of thing. Do you see that being one of the higher demand items that they may resist, or would you try to keep that in the community for stuff that we may have to deal with? It's the only single item we have that would deal with those occurrences in our community, right? So
Yeah, so an update on that we got from Fire Chiefs conference that I just attended was BC Wildfire is building, I think, 2 more of the larger, the 52-foot trailers. And they have numerous type 2, like the one we're building, in inventory. So they're trying not to ask for those ones. They're telling people if they're building a trailer now to build it for your community, which is the idea we built that one for as well.
Good.
Community and kind of the surrounding TNRD area A,
yeah, that's
if
perfect.
required, right?
Thank you.
Okay, further comments on that? Anything? Okay. So there's a recommendation that council adopts policy number 2202, deployment of fire department resources out of district. What is the will of council? Thank you, Council Bamford.
I'll
Seconded
second.
by Council Taylor. All those in favor? Thank you for your report, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Yeah, in watching what happened in Merritt and Logan Lake, generally the fire chiefs or departments call on areas that are at 0 or low risk first, and don't generally come knocking on the door of the ones that are at high or extreme risk anyway. So it's good. Moving on to item 18.3, the statement of financial information, commonly referred to as SOFI, which is what Mr. McElroy's comments were actually about. So there is a recommendation. I'll turn it over to staff for comments. Go ahead, Ms. Klassen.
So I'm happy to present the 2021 Statement of Financial Information. This SOFI report is a requirement for the District of Clearwater as per the Financial Information Act. It needs to be filed by June the 30th of every year. In addition to the financial statements, you will see a schedule of expenses or schedule of remuneration and expenses. That is for, it lists specifically the mayor and council remuneration and expenses, as well as all staff members that are greater than $75,000. And it also has a schedule of payments made for goods and services for all vendors that are greater than $25,000. And then there is a statement of payments of grants or contributions and a statement of financial information regarding severance agreements, but we haven't had any during the year of 2021, and a schedule of guarantee or indemnities. And again, we haven't had any of those. So that it concludes basically the differences from the financial statements that we presented earlier in May.
Any questions on this? Give me a second. Anything, Councilor Taylor? No. Thank you for your work. The fact that nobody has any questions and it all seems to make sense, and that's great. I'm just looking at a bunch of blank faces here, so I think they're happy with it. Anything further you'd like to say to it, or are you all good? Okay. Yes, so there is a recommendation that council resolved to accept the 2021 statements of financial information, SOFI, as presented here, by authorize the mayor and district of director of finance to sign the attached statement of financial information approval prior to the forwarding of the document to the ministry and posting for public information. Mover and a seconder on that. Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor, and that passes. Thank you. Moving on to Canada Day event update. There is a report 231, 232 of your agenda. It looks like there's an opportunity for council to volunteer there if they so wish. Go ahead, Wiley, if you have comments on it.
That was an excellent summary and was pretty much what my request is. Yeah, so following the recommendation by Councillor Sim that we look at Canada Day, we've done that. It was already in the budget, so we didn't need to bring it back. So we've gone ahead and done some planning, which I've outlined here. So basically, would like to know if anyone would like to come and help out some cupcakes and say a few words. You can have a cupcake.
You can have a cupcake.
I will hand up cupcakes. I don't think I'll be the speaker, but I'd leave that to Mayor Blackwell or Councillor.
I will attend in whatever form necessary. I will even bring my new apron. Thank you.
Okay.
Because we haven't had Canada Day for a while, there was that great photo where council had Love Where You Live aprons. And they were actually quite popular and they were actually purchased and it does speak to some of our depleted swag. If there was time, maybe there is, to order them, it would be great to have them. Through which budget?
No.
Oh, okay.
So that was when there was a barbecue, right? Do we need aprons if there's not
You're
a
serving
barbecue?
cupcakes.
Okay.
It's actually just an excuse to order them because I think it does sort of complement. And I think that as we start building more social connections, it is a nice thing that people have. It's not just for council, it's for the community.
We'll let staff work on the availability of that.
Okay.
Thank you. But yes, I agree. One of the things I have really missed over the last couple of years is flipping burgers and talking to people with the red apron on for
It
sure.
was nice.
And mine is worn out, so that's good.
I didn't want to say that.
Okay.
but
Okay,
Yeah.
council swag.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you get a red
Community
apron, it means
swag.
you have to run for another term. Just saying.
Council,
Wow,
I would
fight.
like to note that we're not doing a barbecue. This is a low-key Canada Day. So I'm thrilled that you're all so excited, but this is a low-key. And I would like to also point out, we are doing this in collaboration with the North Thompson Aboriginal Cultural Center. And so they will be having bannock and having a fun photo booth, and the teepees will be there and crafts. And so we also want to be recognize the efforts that they're putting into being at a Canada Day event.
Thank you. Yes.
So
So what you're
aprons
basically,
for them too.
so we
That's okay.
yes.
I think it's a great idea. Good.
Thank you. It means we're gonna get well fed at this, even if it's not just all cupcakes. Sounds good. Thank you. Next item is 18.5 UBCM attendance. I will attend. We'll put that on the record right now. Any other counselors would like to commit to attending right now? That would be useful to Mr. Penny and Mr. Thomas, I'm sure. If not, please get back to them in the next few days, because what's the deadline? What's the early bird deadline?
There's not actually, the deadline would actually be a month out. We have to cancel the hotel rooms. I've purchased 5 hotel rooms, so I'd have to cancel that by a month out. The deadline that's more immediate is if you want a meeting with a premier or a cabinet member. That's June 24th, so this Friday. And of course, June 30th is the deadline for UBCM resolutions.
Okay, so we have the one resolution, I think pushing, meeting with Minister of Forests over the wildfire issue, at least to then, so we have not heard anything back on the IA crew, initial attack crew issue. So if we can't get it between now and then, let's try to get it at UBCM. Councillor Sim.
Are you also going to ask for a meeting in regards to the motion for the district? at that time?
Yeah, we can add both of those into
Yeah.
the thing. I mean, I think it's a point to have that discussion there. I actually already primed the forest minister that we would be discussing tabular rates. I got a kind of a, oh, look, but because I don't think I mentioned it was in relation to community forest. So yes, both of those would be items to discuss. Mr. Thomas?
Would council like to schedule meetings related to MOTI as well as healthcare at all?
Anything on healthcare for starters?
I
Do we,
maybe the only thing, if we wanted to ask the Minister of Health, given the fact that they are responding, is how do you ensure that communities have that piece of equity? So when things are rolled out, because we don't want to repeat the pattern of communities being pit against one another. So how is that taking place? And how can, smaller communities be involved with that?
so maybe we ask for the meeting and then we flesh out what we want for, it. But I mean, I get the equity point. I think that's a fair one. MOTI, Valemount is, as I stated earlier, is asking for a meeting and we can go along with that. I'm quite sure Barrier is going to ask for a meeting too. We could ask for our own meeting, but
Just to
Yeah, go
follow up
ahead.
on that, the health one is I think also asking some prodding questions about the College of Physicians and Surgeons and who is going to do that oversight. There was an article just even in the CBC and it talked about the 2 doctors from Ukraine who are now long-term care workers because it's going to take years and years and years to have accreditation. And so even to go for a nurse practitioner, it's that same stumbling block that it's the college seems to have this firm hand. Who's reviewing the college? Who's holding them? Forever. Yeah.
okay, so got some basic points on meetings there anyway. So MOTI, I'm less concerned about. I don't think we have an issue that's not going to be taken forward by a neighboring community and that we're not going to be, that will most likely be invited to anyway. So go ahead. Oh, Mr. Penny, what do we need to do? What are you saying?
Roundabouts.
Oh, the roundabout. Yes. Sure. You're stirring the pot again. Yes, let's ask for a meeting with MOTI to put the thorn in their side yet again on the roundabout, and we can discuss other issues. Huh? Dunn Lake Road. Yeah, I've got some thoughts on Dunn Lake Road. Yeah. Thank you. I think that gives you direction on the items there, and please commit to attending if you're going to attend. Moving on, and thank you for adding the agenda on there so that people can understand what they're getting into if they do wish to attend. Okay. Moving on to, where the heck am I? 242 on page 5. Thank you. I just got my agendas stacked on top of each other here. Job fair event update. There is a report. 242 to 245. Any questions? Ms. Bysted? Stead? God, I'm bad. Anyways, so there is a report. It sounded like it was quite successful. There's a lot of good comments.
The write-up in the CSS newsletter was terrific.
Yeah.
So it was really, really good. And yeah, in fact, that's probably something that we could get reintroduced. We used to have it so that CSS had us on the distribution list. And it's just really worth it just to know what kind of our kids are doing and that type of thing. But there was a great photo of you, Mr. Thomas, that was in there. And by the looks of the photo, you just had the kids super engaged. So yeah, I don't doubt it. So it was marvelous.
And I'll add, my 16-year-old came home and mentioned it proactively.
Yeah.
That is a huge endorsement. It's just, so she said it was really good. Thank you.
Your teenager paid attention. That's a win. Excellent. Yay. She want to run for council. Anyways, moving on, we've tackled 18.7, moving on to 18.8. Look it, we've got grant applications. Go ahead.
So this, yes, this is the age-friendly grant application. As noted, the intake is July 5th. It does require a council resolution to submit with it. This particular one, we're working with the Seniors Network and Yellowhead Community Services. We want to make sure that that the municipality has to put forward the application. We wanted to make sure that we had some consensus among the partners. It seems that we do. And so we are working towards putting this together. We have already received letters of support from the Plan H Healthy Communities, as well as Yellowhead Community Service, and Director Schaefer is in the works. So that's all good news.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Comment, Councillor Frizzle.
This is a really good opportunity for the busing for seniors, and I think of them, but it's not just for seniors. It's anybody that can't get out to go on a Saturday to be able to go to pancake breakfast, the farmers market, and any event that's happening. It just gives them that extra opportunity to get out and about where normally they'd be sitting at home because they're either not driving or they don't want to get out on their own. And a database with all the services in Clearwater is essential. So I'm really for this.
Would you like to move it?
I would love to. Go team.
I'll second it.
Second it. And do you have a comment? No. Okay. Further comment?
My concern is that if Councillor Frizzle, it's a.
Oh, never mind.
I will.
Conflict of interest. Moved by Councillor Taylor.
And I echo the comments that Councillor Fizzle shared. I think the two particular projects are great projects. So I make the motion.
You make the motion. Thank you for catching that. I should have caught that. Councillor Bamford or Sim, would you like to be the seconder on this? Thank you, Councillor Bamford. Further discussion. Great idea. I think the one of the few regularly scheduled community social events, even though it is shopping and things like that, is hanging out at both markets and the pancake breakfast. I think it's fantastic, helps those organizations keep going. All those in favor? Thank you. You have a guidebook. We'll get you a dog too. Moving on to the next one, which is also another grant application under the Strategic Priorities Fund. Go ahead on this one.
Okay, so in fact, the next two are both for the Strategic Priorities Fund. And of course, they've been divided up into separate because they're separate streams. So this particular one for the capacity building stream is, my notes here, right? So this is the Integrated Stormwater Management Plan. And so this is, well, I mean, the report has it all, but we need a council resolution. Submission is by June 30th. We have information that we've been working on through the years from True Consulting. And so, and it's a missing piece that we have in terms of moving forward. We need to have the integrated plan to be able to do future work.
This has been battered around the table. The grant opportunities here. Any questions from council? Mover and a seconder then. Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Bamford. Sorry, moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Bamford. All those in favor? Thank you. And then the second one, which is the Clearwater siphon replacement. This is the big flusher that we need to fix urgently. Goes down the hill that has sort of functioned, works, but we don't know how. Okay.
And so my understanding is that this has been applied for under other funds. We're still working on getting the funds to do this job, and as you have just noted, desperately needed. And again, resolution is required to go with the application.
Councillor Bamford.
Just curious, do we have a design plan roughly in place for this? And if we do, Would that be part of the submission? Does that help if we have something already designed and ready to go?
We do have some rough design, which would include relocating part of that sewer piping from basically going over the hill behind the fire department to take a less steep grade, which was submitted as part of the application in February.
Any further questions? If not, can I get a mover and a seconder on this? Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Nice to see some grant applications going out in the world. Moving on to item 19.1, noise bylaw. Staff reports 260 to 265 in your agenda. There are two recommendations on the same item. Staff comments on this one? Tell us what this is about, and why we're doing this.
As the district receives application for permits to work in highway easement, i.e. Trans Mountain, as an example, we also had to look at implications for other bylaws, including noise bylaw. The current noise bylaw prohibits operation, I believe, from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m., depending on the time of year. In the fire season, they're allowed to start a little bit earlier and end a little bit later as well. However, one of the requests we received was to allow for 24 hours operation, which would be in violation of the bylaw. And so given the extenuating circumstances of the project, we are proposing or recommending to council to do an amendment to allow for activities and discretion of staff to approve some of those permits, because right now we would not be in a position to approve that permit as it is prohibited by the bylaw.
I'm going to see some questions on this one. Questions of staff. Councillor Taylor.
So I think the confusion is that it's a highway permit, but what we're saying is there's a second order impact of the noise control. So because they'll be using the highway, but it will be, oh no, I'm confused. I guess it's just the challenge is understanding how this comes under traffic control and noise control. Is the expectation that if we allow the traffic to, and we give that permit, we then generate noise outside of the noise control hours. And so we need something in the noise control bylaw that allows the 24-hour. Okay. Clear as mud?
Clear as mud to some people. Further questions? Councillor Sim.
So it seems tricky because it seems that this is a special, it's a special case. But the overarching is I certainly wouldn't want to give staff the authority to decide when a bylaw worked and when it didn't work. So it's a way to make the concession. How do you make the concession? How do you almost put it in a context outside of a noise bylaw? So to me, that you need a special exception that you can act as the default breaker. So for example, for major projects impacting community development, that would be sort of the trigger piece. So you can fall back on something that doesn't mean that the noise bylaw would even be activated because it's superseded. How's that for clear as mud?
Further comments, Councillor Taylor?
So putting some boundaries around the criteria to approve that, provide those exceptions, as opposed to, my friend down the street wants to do some noisy work, so I'm going to give them a permit.
So for examples were when they were doing the logging up behind, and that there had been some concerns about that. And then there was sort of the uprising, which said, look, sometimes in order to make improvements or to run an economy, there's going to be some noise disruptions. It could be that there's a 3-week, maybe it's a 3-week, so it's a time permission that's triggered. that would do something, but I think that what it has to come down to is the rationale for why, and that would need to be an economic impact to the community, and I see any improvements as being under that.
Councilor Bamford, go ahead.
I think as an example, maybe, and I'm not sure where the traffic control links into it, but the noise bylaw, right now, by Myrtle, they're building a massively high soundproofing wall. Trans Mountain is, just because of the boringness going to occur. And right now they're doing it 6 days a week, and they're starting like at 7 in the morning. And there's even some activities that are going on Sundays. So I assume this is sort of giving the authority for those type situations to have an approval being granted by, I take it, the public works manager or his designate, for those things to occur outside the bylaw as it currently is written. Is that correct?
Partially. So the current infrastructure for bylaw, or the traffic bylaw, as well as the noise bylaw, allows for work to happen throughout the day, regardless of the decibels produced as a result. However, they need to be able to, in this particular instance that triggered this request, they need to be able to work outside of those hours permitted in the bylaw as it is written. And so only in extraordinary circumstances could we envision a provision N, which is being proposed, being used. We're trying to avoid a situation where staff is actively breaking the bylaw.
Yeah, that's what I meant by having the magic wand.
Okay, further comments? If not, I have two recommendations. First, the noise control bylaw amendment, bylaw number 26622, be introduced and read for a first time. Somebody wish to move that one? Second. Further concerns or questions?
Well, I just, maybe there's something in the wording then that.
This is your expertise.
I have no expertise here. Clause N. So at the moment it says noise or sound created by extraordinary activity and or construction projects which have been authorized to take place by Public Works or their designate. I read that as and or any construction projects which have been, like the extraordinary to me talks about extraordinary activity. So I don't know whether it's and or significant construction projects. I don't know. But I think whether there's something more in that wording to make sure that it is these big one-off cases. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, pretty much anything you could put in there is up to interpretation, so. Unless you come with that. Councillor Sim, or sorry, Frizzle, do you have a further? Having a day, okay?
Really?
Because what's extraordinary?
I don't think the bylaw provides any definition of what the meaning of extraordinary means. In an unrelated discussion about a development file, one of the questions that we had to contend with was the interpretation staff provided. And the response that I received from an expert was, if a third party, let's say a court, was to review the decision made by a staff pursuant to a bylaw or a policy, it often comes down to deference, meaning, did the person reasonably apply the bylaw? So would someone reasonably consider the TMX project, as an example, an extraordinary project? Shooting off fireworks at night may not meet that threshold of a reasonable test.
Yeah, what I'm getting from what you're saying here is that there's no, that it would be up to basically somebody else to decide that for us. I mean, there's no real way to quantify what extraordinary is. It's going to be a judgment call. So setting a limit or. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
So I
'cause
think
I'm
I
lost.
think my concern is that just the grammar here, or like the way it's phrased, because the and or removes construction projects from the word extraordinary. So you're saying by extraordinary activity being one thing, and or construction projects being another. So maybe we just need to reinsert extraordinary before construction projects. Because right now it reads that any construction projects could be within that definition. Twice, yeah. I think it's the separation caused by the and or in the language.
So just tell me what you want to say then, just.
Noise or sound created by extraordinary activity and or extraordinary construction projects which have been authorized to take place by the Public Works Manager.
Do you want to mention in there that have a specific lifespan? So for example, so it's not a repetitive, but supporting the fact that extraordinary meaning it doesn't happen all the time, or is that too granular?
Mr. Thomas, any thoughts on that? No.
What,
What was the question?
what about applying for just an exemption from the noise bylaw?
That could be a provision.
And then it's just, I don't know. It's just
But
my
then
thought.
the question of who would, I guess, adjudicate the request.
Yeah, but adjudication on extraordinary is also maybe something that is because it's not so closely defined. So that it's the same discussion.
No, yeah, I understand. What I'm asking is, would it be a staff decision or the exemption needs to be applied to council and they have to present the process?
I think we need to be able to move quickly on these exemptions or exclusions, I guess.
Councillor Bamford.
I guess
Exceptions.
the other thought on this is the way it's written right now, the exemption gives them 24/7,
That's what they want.
you know, so it's anytime, day or night.
That's the request. So we can, I mean, the way these things work, we can move one and two and then do amendments at 3 or after 2. But I mean, I think adding extraordinary after the and or seems like a feasible thing at this particular point on item N. This is not going to come up that often. So take that into account that we may be, you know, especially with extraordinary thrown in there twice. I think it's going to be Trans Mountain and maybe a mine or another major industrial project, which I don't foresee on the future of this council or the next term council. Councillor Sim?
Do you want to just, is there any contemplation for just a time limit on it? Would that be something that would be helpful or not, or is it just an open time? That's just.
Yeah.
So add comma for a temporary period.
Exactly, and then it goes back for a renewal of that. I don't know. It's just a thought. It doesn't have to be.
Mr. Thomas?
What we could do, or what council can do, is defer a decision or table a decision on this and share with staff the specific concerns that council would like us to look at. We can provide a follow-up report on how those concerns actually laid out in the existing bylaw and how they could be remedied with new provision.
My only question on that is obviously this is coming forward now, so this must have some time sensitivity to it.
It does, unfortunately.
Okay. So can we do it as is with the extraordinary? Can I get somebody to move noise control bylaw with the addition of for first time with the addition of
Extraordinary.
after and or and before construction? Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? And that means I get to read District of Clearwater bylaw number 226/2022, a bylaw to amend District of Clearwater noise control bylaw number 14, whereas the Purpose of this bylaw is to amend the District of Clearwater Noise Control Bylaw number 2008 to allow for the discretionary approval of extraordinary construction projects. Now, therefore, the Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as District of Clearwater Noise Bylaw number 14, Amendment Bylaw number 266/2022. All those in favor, that's when we're supposed to say the all the favor point. Recommendation number 2 be read for a second and third time. Somebody wish to move? Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. District of Clearwater bylaw number 266, sorry. 2022, a bylaw to amend the District of Clearwater Noise Control Bylaw number 14, whereas the purpose of this bylaw is to amend the District of Clearwater Noise Control Bylaw number 14, 2008, to allow for the discretionary approval of extraordinary construction projects. Now, therefore, Council of the District of Clearwater in open meeting assembles and acts as follows. This bylaw may be cited as the District of Clearwater Noise Control Bylaw number 14, Amendment Bylaw number 266, 2022. All those in favor? Okay, we're through that one. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence response required. There is a lessons learned provincial survey COVID-19. Page 266, ironically, which I just stumbled over 6 times in that bylaw of your agenda. There's an online survey with a link, if we can just get that forwarded by email, I guess. Yeah, to council members, if there's anything they'd like to either do the survey or anything along those lines. I think I have some personal comments I'll throw in there. So we'll leave that to council to have a look at individually. Then moving on to information items, Thompson-Nicola Regional District Building Inspection Services Report 267. Shannon Stubbs, MP Lakeland on rural economic concerns. And the last one is modernizing emergency management legislation, an updated timeline. Announcement there. No notice of motion, no other business. Comments from the massive amount of public we have here. Annabelle. Yep, so are we. That's an agenda item for a future agenda, setting standards for that sort of thing. So it will be done. Yeah. 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 Yeah, and this is all the kind of trail standard stuff that will need to be looked at. Yeah. No, staff is working on that, and a recommendation will come forward as part of, yeah, for sure. Anything else? No, good. Thank you. We do need to move to in camera. There's a recommendation that the meeting be closed to public pursuant to 1K of the community charter to discuss matters relating to negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are in their preliminary stages, and that in the view of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Frizzle. Take a 4-minute recess, and actually we could take a 10 and go get Bannock and chili if you wish.